Hello, how are you?
I'm very well. Very happy to be here with you, Brianna.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here with you as well. I'm actually really excited for this conversation, and I have been looking forward to it. So, as you know, the series is a conversation on race, culture, and racism in America, and kind of like where we're at and how we have come to this point. And we're trying to create that dialogue. But part of that, so as you know, I'm a teacher. I teach middle school religion, and I absolutely adore my students. And I do teach it at an inner city Catholic school, and something that I've come to like really see over the past few months of teaching is I've been able to see that my students need an opportunity to dream, and they need to believe in themselves. And there are certain kids who do believe in themselves, and they have really good influences in their life. And then I've seen certain students where they do need a little push. And when we were thinking, or whenever we were kind of coming up with this series, they were always in the back of my mind because I want to be able to give young kids that opportunity to dream. And I want them to see that success is working hard, and it's believing in yourself and pushing through that adversity. So that's kind of a little piece of this conversation today.
I completely understand. And sometimes, first of all, I'm very happy to share my experience here with you. You know, to dream is very important. In fact, since I was a little kid, one of my greatest dreams were to speak more than one language, for example, you know. And many people in that time say, but why, So here we are. So use your mother tongue, and that's all. But I thought, why not? And I began to listen music in different languages, especially English in that time when I was a little kid. I was 8, 9 years old. And then in school, we're actually getting English, in school, so it's fine. But then arrived a moment that I say, I would love to study in Europe. That's another of my dreams. And ironically, by doing any kinds of efforts, and of course, my path of life is very unique because there was a moment that I decided to go into the seminary, and then I became a priest. So practically my decisions were marginalized because I needed to obey, my superiors. And ironically, that is the irony of God. So through that, he gave me the opportunity then to go to Europe and to practically have 80% of my whole formation, my education there, with the influence of the Jesuits and living at the Capranica, which is actually my fraternity, what we call collegio. It's and then practically I was a minority in that collegio. Collegio in Italy is the place where you live. It's like the seminary, though, but we were seminarians and priests, and it's more like a fraternity. So 95% of the Capranica in that time was Italian. The other 5% foreigners. From Latin America, we were around 3 in that time. So, but the culture that predominates is always Italian, right? Because we're there. But when you go to school at the university, I remember in my class at the Gregorian, we were around 200 to 250, around that. And practically, there were more than 20 languages being spoken in that classroom. People from all over the world, from Asia, from Africa, from Europe, from Latin America, from United States, Canada, from everywhere. So I got the true sense of Catholicism, in the Catholic Church, which is amazing to see. But also, it's beautiful to see that the universality in cultures, in languages, also sensibilities, but also a great deal of differences that you can see between the cultures and the sensibilities. And it is that for me is one of the greatest gifts of the education, more than actually the intellectual part is of course very important, especially for the great professors and so on that you get at university, but also this kind of human relationship with others that are so different from you, but at the same time they help me to understand me better.
Nice. So you've kind of been in academia like from the age of 20 until now.
Yeah, I mean, yes, absolutely, yes.
How does that make you feel?
No,
do you like it? Do you like being in academia, or is this your? Do you like this being in academia?
I mean, so far, that's a tricky question. I like many aspects of academia. The one that I like the most is the research part. That is one of my passions, and that is something that is very much inculcated in my formation. Always to produce, always to dig more, always to look for more, always to learn more. For whom? For him. And the mystery of God cannot be exhausted, cannot be limited. It's impossible. So
Let's
we
talk
never
about that.
stop.
So we learned that in philosophy and theology, like of having this like, what is that concept called? The supernatural existential, where you have this God-sized hole in your heart that only God can fulfill, right?
That's right.
So I've kind of been contemplating this lately, that because I'm reading Athanasius for a grad class, and then I've just been doing other research. And like I said, I'm a middle school teacher. And obviously my students don't need to know this, but I see this like desire and this yearning for them to learn. And it kind of, it really does make me think like, oh, what I studied in college, it didn't go to waste. So I used to joke around. I have a philosophy degree, as you know, and I would joke around and saying like, oh, can't do anything with that. But I can see all of these things that I've learned about these principles, and I actually like see that like my students, they desire to learn, and it may not be about religion. It's probably like the last thing that they care to learn, but they want to learn language. They want to learn. They have this eagerness in them to learn. And I've been thinking about that, and it's kind of like and we hear this in school in our philosophy and theology classes of like, there's this never-ending desire to learn. That's like a lifelong thing, right? Like that does not end.
That is actually a vocation inside of a vocation. Mm-hmm. Literally, all of us, we are built to be together with our Creator. Mm. And that task, that quest never ends, never ends. And if God created the universe and create each person, in one way or another, everything is a vestigia. It's like an imprint of God himself. So that means it's necessary, it's required for me to get to know God through every reality in which I am. That implies, and nothing is wasted, nothing. So, in fact, we are living in a very technocratic society where everything is technology, that is what is worth. Everything that is liberal arts or the cultivation of the mind by reading philosophers, okay, of the 4th century BC, this society today, so, that is a waste of time. For me, it is a fallacy, that kind of thinking. Why? This is something that I have been meditating quite a lot. And I think of each one of us, right? Like a beautiful piece of art. For example, Van Gogh, right? Or Rembrandt. Oh my goodness! When you get very close to the paintings, right, you will see many different kinds of strokes. Mm-hmm. Many different, especially Van Gogh. It's amazing when I see his paintings, and sometimes he put layers upon layers upon layers upon layers until he get the right effect of the light and the color. And when you go closer, you see tiny little brushes and strokes in many different ways. Literally, our education is that. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we say, why is it worth it to read Plato or Athanasius of Alexandria or John Chrysostom or Bonaventure, right? Why? When I'm supposed to be studying algorithms and how and ACC plus programs, in order to build the cloud, right? So it's great. But everything is a value added. Every single thing that we learn regarding the knowledge of humanity, everything that we have inherited throughout history, in one way or another, is a stroke that will add a nuance, a matiz of color to each one of us until slowly we're becoming a piece of art that is priceless. And when we put God into that kind of process, he's the one then who is using the chisel or the pencil or the color, the aquarela, to create the effects. It's beautiful, right?
Yeah, yes. So let's talk about your experience in New York versus Houston and Rome. And each has a different set of people, like a different culture and a different just way of life. And how has that shaped you? How has that developed you?
Yeah. In fact, I mean, my experiences in different countries has been shaping me to the point that, more than qualify me with the citizenship, I'd rather to call myself by my own identity, which is I am Dempsey, right? But nevertheless, I mean, part of my heart is in each one of those different countries because the experiences that I had there, in one way or another, they were instruments of God to make me where I am. Mm-hmm. So, for example, in Italy, it was fascinating. I mean, I love the Italian culture. I truly do. The Italian food, of course. I mean, I don't even have to say that.
All the pasta and
quite
pizza.
Obvious, yes. But nevertheless, the Italian heart and hospitality is incredible, especially when I was going in mission to the later areas in the south or in the north or in the middle of the country, when I was going to Sicily or Sardinia. Fascinating. But of course, when you are, for example, in a big community, for example, at the university level, and you find many different cultures, of course, they're going to see that every culture, every group has the tendency to create their own clique, right?
Yeah.
Which is quite natural because that is human nature. And unfortunately, sometimes those cliques are very hermetic. Other ones are more open, right? And that sometimes creates some kind of clashes or some kind of little islands, not just on individuals, but actually in groups. And that is unfortunately part of the experience. Doesn't matter wherever you go. I was always the foreigner, right? Which is normal. And it was a time in my life that actually that was part of me, define myself as a foreigner, as the one who is here as a guest. Right? Mm-hmm. In this country as a guest, in this place as a guest. And there are some people who actually remind you of that continuously, right? So, but as I say, I didn't take it in a very negative way. Actually, I took it as something that was quite natural to experience. And in one way or another, make my skin get thicker, right?
Yeah.
So, because that is part of the human nature. Then, ironically, when I came to New York, that was quite fascinating. I mean, why? I came to New York.
New York is your home.
Actually, New York opened the doors for me in many ways, especially because I was already doing my PhD dissertation was the time that I needed to write. But also in New York, they were asking for a priest to help who can actually speak very good English and Spanish, can be bilingual, especially for the pastoral needs in that area. So, and it was fascinating because then I began to have this contact with the people of New York. And to say the people of New York is to say people from all over the world. Mm-hmm. So New York is New York. So it doesn't matter which country or which part of the United States you are coming from. When you are there, you are in New York. Mm-hmm. And for me, I never forget. That was the most wonderful experience that I have in this beautiful country of ours, is that after 1 month living in New York, everybody was treating me as a New Yorker. So
I feel like New York is its own country.
It's incredible. It's like I never felt that in any other country, of course, not even in Italy, which is fascinating. But at the end, it's impossible, right? You're always a foreigner. You are extracomunitario. That is the way how they used to call my friends. So, and here in New York, all of a sudden, oh no, you're one of us. You're living here. You are one of us. That's it. Wow. And everybody's speaking so many different kinds of accents, languages from all over the world. It was mesmerizing to me. Mesmerizing. Intellectually, spiritually, pastorally, it was fantastic. And that really gave me actually a new kind of a comprehension, understanding of the culture of this country that is so complex. Because then I began to realize that I cannot define New York as the totality of the United States. Practically every state has its own nuance,
Mm-hmm.
And I began to realize that when I came here to Texas, this is from New York to Texas, that is actually an amazing trip. And I say trip, not because of the distance, right? On the plane, it's actually culturally, it's like living in a different country.
Yeah. You said that your bishop has you here in Houston. So, yes, you are a professor here at UST, but you also you do your priestly work, your ministry. And how is that for you? Like those two worlds, like what does that teach you, or how are you in those two worlds?
Yeah.
Because I feel like those are two different worlds.
They are, actually, they are. And that experience began to be very intense when I arrived to New York, because I needed to work there as an associate pastor, right? But at the same time, I needed to finish my dissertation. So I was trying to literally balance my pastoral life, my duties, but at the same time, research, writing, reflecting. So, but then it became more intense when I came here. But here, for example, here is it's a little bit different because I don't have the pressure to finish a dissertation. So that part is over, right? Now, there are other different kinds of stress. So, but it's quite important to highlight that sometimes we have this notion of theology as an intellectual exercise, right? It's what we call in Italian, actually, at the school in theology, our professors and ourselves, actually, we use this expression in order to make the difference between the theology as an intellectual exercise. We call it theologia da tavolino. That means a theology that comes from the desk, you know. So,
yes.
So that is actually one expression that we used to have, at least in my time, you know. That means that it's an intellectual exercise. Yes, it's beautiful. Yes. But in one way or another, it's a kind of theology that is disconnected from the prayer life and from the pastoral life. I mean, from the praxis, okay? From the praxis. And the ideal is to have both of them combined equally. That would be the ideal. And it's very difficult, very difficult. So sometimes, especially in our mindset and especially in this modern context, what predominates in academia is theologia da tavolino. That means theology as an intellectual exercise, right? Which is very rigorous, very precise. It's difficult also for matters of vocabulary. I mean, you need to use the proper vocabulary to articulate the mystery. And of course, there are countless of theories and positions or, you know, so on. In spite of the dogma and the tradition that we have. Always we have many currents inside of modern theology, right? So, but also it is, when I go then to a parish or when I go there to a community and I began to listen to confessions or spiritual direction or people come to talk to me because they have a problem. So then I realize, my goodness, so here I am, you know, I feel sometimes like I am in two different worlds, right? So from one part, in the academia, we are concerned, you know, about this expression from this manuscript or this footnote from this document, from the codex from the 5th century, or how this variant in this lecture from this Byzantine manuscript is different from the Codex Vaticanus or the Codex Bese, you know, and so on. And then all of a sudden, then I have to go to, you know, in a parish to talk to somebody, and then, you know, Father, I have cancer, you know, and I'm losing my faith in God. Say, you know, and then you all of a sudden you say, you know, okay, why? How useful it is for me now that footnote in that codex from the 5th century or the 9th century now.
Yeah.
So how? Tell me how. So that is actually the fight that I do in my mind with God. Oh, God. So now tell me, what should I do now? So and then is the humble attitude that I need to take in front of God and the reality to say, gosh, you know, now how can I be an instrument of God in this situation when nothing of that kind of exercise that is so rigorous sometimes is not helpful here. And sometimes I find instruments, yes, when I'm reading a text that is fantastic and that help me to grow spiritually, that help me at the same time to help spiritually somebody else. But ironically, sometimes I find experiences of life from the people that maybe they don't even know how to write and read, or maybe they don't have a clue what is theology, that they tell me something that is so compelling, something that is real. Like, for example, Father, I lost my son. He died. He was 2 years old. That really breaks your heart when you hear that kind of things. And then to listen to all this pain and all this crisis of faith. And then you listen to that. And then you wonder, my goodness, it's amazing that this person is still keeping the faith. Is how in the world? And ironically, when I go to read the prophet Jeremiah and I read the complaints of Jeremiah from chapter 11 to chapter 20, everything becomes alive. Why? Because of listening to the people.
Yeah.
So ironically, the life of the people helped me to have better intuitions when I read texts of the scriptures that sometimes are obscure.
So with all of that being said, I remember just a young undergrad girl, and I was really struggling emotionally. There were like other things going on in my life, and I stopped dreaming. And I used to be a person who had so much perseverance, like so much like dedication to things. I was an all A/B student, and I went from that to like failing classes, and just I experienced failure for the very first time in a way that I had never thought I could. And not just failure like academically, but failure in the sense of like my emotional health and like my spiritual health and my physical health. And it was through a few people in my, like a few professors to be exact, and they saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And they helped me like gain back that like self-confidence and that idea that I am like worth it, that I am important, that I do matter. And I developed like a sense of hope, and I came out of that so much stronger. Like I no longer cared about what other people thought of me. I realized that like what I experienced is so much similar to what other young brown girls experience. And I realized that it is so important to have a dream at a young age and to cultivate that dream. For my students, where there are some where I see that certain students don't see their worth and their value, and I want them to. Like I want them to see that, so that way because they are important, they do matter, and they are loved. And I want them to be able to cultivate that hope and to keep that with them in their heart. And I really, truly believe that virtue of hope is so like necessary, and that's what travels with us throughout the rest of our life.
Hope is actually a tremendous force. And unfortunately, today, when we think of hope, we simplistically think of desires, what I desire, in the future to have. So that is my hope. And actually, it's by far more profound than that. You said clearly, in a proper way, that is a virtue, especially in the Catholic tradition, it's a theological virtue, right? Mm-hmm. So that means in one way or another, its source is in God. Mm-hmm. So my ultimate desire, but I would like to avoid that word for now. My ultimate goal is to have the conviction that I will be with Him, that I will be with God forever, right? Because that is the fulfillment of the whole that I have, the whole that only God can fulfill, right? So very beautiful. But talking about it in the more pragmatic way, in the reality in which we are, which is the reality of the minorities, which is the reality, in this case, of the Latinos, the Hispanics we are living here in this country. We actually are living in a culture in which it's a lot easier to destroy hope. Why? Because we already, by the social constructions that we may have, call that discrimination, call that racism, call that lack of opportunity. You can have so many qualifications for that. literally, we already are born with a sense of the only hope that we can get is whatever these social constructions can offer us as a standard of living, when in reality, that is a mental and spiritual prison, which is literally the opposite of hope. And this lack of hope is the lack of the true goal of our life. And the true goal of our life is that we are created to love God. And to achieve that love implies a union with Him. In the Greek, spirituality is called theosis, this process of the deification of the humanity. Actually, Athanasius actually talks about this.
Yes.
Very important. He's the incarnazione, or on the incarnation, which is very beautiful. So here's when the study of theology becomes so beautiful in the practical aspect of life, right? And precisely what happened is that they give us all this kind of false hopes or notions of goals that are actually not the true hope that we're supposed to have. The true hope, which is to achieve, to be with God, implies to achieve my fullest potential. To achieve my fullest potential, because that is exactly what God wants from me, to achieve the fullest potential. That means that I need to break with all these barriers, with all these social constructions, and to allow myself to dream, to be the best that I can be, just for Him who created me. Very important. And we forget that. We truly forget that. And that is so, here I become very emotional.
It's getting heated.
But here, this is exactly the point. It's just for me so frustrating then to see, no, the best that I can do because I'm Latino or Hispanic is just to go to that school. No, that is wrong.
Yeah.
Or the best that I can do because I'm Latino is just to achieve that role, that job. No, that is wrong. Oh no, you cannot speak no more than that, or you are not capable to study that level because you are from this minority. Absolutely wrong. That is literally an anti-God way of living, an anti-God way of educating. Very important.
Education should be not limiting, and it should be expanding.
It's exactly the opposite.
Yeah.
It's exactly the opposite. And no. We need to teach not to that level because, they are what they are. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
So the quality of the education cannot be determined by the background or the color of the skin or the pre-assumptions that because they are coming from certain background, they don't have the mental capacity to understand these concepts. That is absurd and that is a fallacy. If that is the way, then the whole human evolution shouldn't even exist then.
But they do deserve just as good an education as anyone else out there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that is a responsibility. At least it is a responsibility if we are talking about the Catholic intellectual tradition, is to educate the poor and to educate the poor the best that we can. In fact, that is the whole mission of the didaskalos. Who is the didaskalos? Didaskalos in Greek is the teacher. Who is the didaskalos? Jesus himself. And Jesus himself was actually teaching precisely with the people, the common people, those who couldn't read. And what was the methodology? Parables, analogies. And he was talking about the mysteries of heaven, the kingdom of God or the kingdom of heaven, right? The Basileia to Uranus, the kingdom of heaven. So he was not using this complicated vocabulary that we use today. He was
using parables.
Exactly.
He was using parables.
Matthew chapter 13. Matthew chapter 13. So to what should I compare the kingdom of heaven? To what? To such a point that the people will understand. But that is the thing. Then we go with another interpretation that can be actually very dangerous. So let us give just the parables. No, that is just the appetizer. So that will open the door for more.
Yeah, and I think we have a duty. The more we know, the more we should be educating others.
Which is a sacred duty. A sacred duty.